You know what this is. You know what it is well. It's the back of any CD. Now, sometimes these CDs are meant for enjoyment. In fact, most of the times, they give me nothing but pleasure and joy. But sometimes, they're just full of crap, doo-doo diarrhea, and some of the worst recorded music of all time. These humble discs can hold one of two potential possibilities. Either rectified greatness or total apocalyptic bullshit! That's right, it's Metallica's Saint Anger. Now, many of you will remember this from my first account, simply entitled Coverkiller, as my first review. Well, I'm going to revisit this pile of shit, and it's going to be done the right way. Done extremely angry, and not under an assumed name. Saint Anger was released back in the early 2000s, and it was heralded as one of the next great albums that was going to be put out by Metallica. There hadn't been a new Metallica album since the Load and Reload cycle came through in the late 1990s, so really the wait was about 5 to 7 years. In between there, they actually released Garage Incorporated, which was just a group of covers that they had assembled throughout the years. And while this album actually is really good, considering many of the songs in which they chose accurately represented metal history amongst whenever they were first getting together and really writing their material in the beginning of the 80s, it really is considered by most fans not to be a Metallica album. Now, a lot of people will also say the same for S&M, considering it was basically just a live album done with a symphony. However, this album had something very promising on it. It had two songs on it that nobody had ever heard before, No Leaf Clover and Minus Human. Both of these songs were rumored to be on Saint Anger. However, whenever you take a look, neither of them are featured on this piece of shit. And maybe it would have saved this album, because these two songs, if you listen to S&M, were actually good. And then everybody remembers the song from Mission Impossible, I Disappear. Now, of course, having Metallica on the soundtrack sounded like a really good idea. And ironically, the song title, I Disappear, is actually very apropos for the Mission Impossible theme. The song itself, however, was a steaming pile of vomit. This is the song that really should have set us up for exactly what Saint Anger was going to produce for us. This was a boring song. It was extremely redundant. James's lyrics were absolutely atrocious. The stupid hey, hey, hey that we've come to really bash to this day. Not to mention the lack of really anything reminiscent to what we're used to with Metallica, who produced such great albums such as Ride the Lightning, Master of Puppets, and the Black Album. So whenever Saint Anger came out, tons of fans rushed out to get it. And first up, take a look at this. This is exactly how you're going to feel whenever you listen to this record. It's such an accurate portrayal that it's almost scary. You're tied down by your love of Metallica and not wanting to believe that this album is the steaming pile of garbage that people claim that it is. But whenever you take a look at the face, that's the face that you'll be having by the time you finish this atrocity. Look at it. It's screaming. It's tortured. The wings have been accurately held back. They've been bound down on your knees, praying to God for this to end. But it doesn't, ladies and gentlemen. It doesn't end. What's the first thing that you're going to notice on this album? First off, it's 11 tracks, which really doesn't seem like it should be all that bad. However, these tracks are exceptionally long and exceptionally boring. What's so boring about them? It's the fact that there's no real musical dynamisty here. What you're hearing a lot is the same riff or the same portion of a song being played in a very repetitive way, in a very repetitive, very orderistic method. Whereas in most Metallica songs, there's a little bit of a dynamic structure to it, where you have a chorus, then a verse and a chorus, then a verse and a chorus, a solo, and then perhaps either another verse and chorus, or just another chorus and a fade. This follows a formula down to the T. It's really going your verse, your chorus, your verse, your chorus, your verse, your chorus, blah, blah, blah. However, on previous Metallica releases, the verses were not repetitive. However, on this album, they are repetitive. Remember System of a Down's Toxicity? Remember how a lot of times the same verse was sung over and over again? That happens on this record too, almost like they took a page right out of their book. And for System of a Down, these songs are relatively quick. So this is something that doesn't get very annoying, nor does it really distract you all that much from the music within. However, on this album, it bores you to tears. You're literally sitting here waiting for something new. You're listening, hoping that something interesting is going to come up, and you're really, really let down. This is an album that's an entire letdown for Metallica fans. It's notorious. I know only one person that actually thinks that this album is okay. The reason why is because he says that it is something different. And while I do agree that it is definitely different, it's the wrong kind of different. Metallica, and just like any other music, should be allowed to explore their sound. However, they are going to be responsible for what their experiment causes. This particular experiment was done all wrong. First off, there is a lacking of solos. Now, solos are not required in order for a band's music to be good, especially in metal. Oftentimes, you'll see bands not use solos because the flow of their music within is enough to really deliver the message. You can hear this a lot in thrash and sometimes in progressive. In progressive metal, you're going to hear a lot of solos because instrumentalization or jacking off on their musical instruments is very common, not to mention something that they love to prove that they are exceptionally good at. However, it's not necessarily a requirement in order to make really good music. The biggest problem with the lack of solos is the fact that the music that should lead into a solo is just plain old boring and repetitive. So thusly, because of that, you're hearing the same thing over and over again, and a little bit of change would have been really nice. Secondly, the drums. The drums are absolute garbage. It sounds like Lars literally went into the kitchen, found as many pots and pans that he possibly could, got a wooden spoon, acting like he was fucking Martha Stewart or some shit, and just started pounding on things. I mean, what the fuck? Lars Ulrich has been considered by many organizations, television stations, or lists to be amongst one of the greatest drummers of all time. Is this because of evolution like this? No. If you want an example of this type of dissonance being done well, check out my last review of Death's the Sound of Perseverance. Richard Christie uses drums that sort of sound like washboards or something like that, but it's actually done very tastefully. This isn't. Secondly, or should I say thirdly, James's lyrics, not to mention his vocals at some points of this song. Like the rest of the album, the real theme here is boring and repetitive. Not to mention, he lets loose some of these strange screams like like he's trying to do something different, something innovative or something like that, and it just ends up being ass. This whole entire album just has ass spelled right on it. This image is really just so fitting that it's ridiculous. Finally, and probably most importantly, this was a band that produced many classic albums with two classic bassists. Cliff Burton during the first three, Kill 'Em All, Ride the Lightning, and Master of Puppets, and Jason Newsted up to this point. Who did they get to perform the bass on this album? Well, none other than the man who kills bands himself, Bob Rock. Yeah, Bob Rock. Bob fucking Rock was doing most of the studio bass on this album. Now, in the listing here, you see Robert Tajolo, who is the current bassist. However, whenever it came to the studio sessions, and this is something that you'll see if you ever watch Some Kind of Monster, Bob Rock did a lot of the arrangements for the bass on this album. And you know what that spells? That spells ass. 100%. Bob Rock kills bands such as Motley Crue, Metallica, and in recent times, for one album at least, Our Lady Peace. This guy's a piece of shit, and he really should be banished from the music business. But let's face it, he's rich enough that he can put his steaming paws all over the bands that I love. Anyways, guys, you guys know exactly how I feel about Metallica's Saint Anger. This is a disc. Well, this angry fist should really represent all of the fans. And really, the barbed wire or the boundingness that you see right here, it's exactly how I feel whenever I listen to this for the first time. Almost like, after the first song, I was like, okay, this kind of sucks. And then I just felt bound to it. Like, fuck, I need to finish listening to this. It's bound to get better. Then it never does. You know what this is best used as? A fucking Frisbee. Saint Anger sucks. And let me tell you something. If you guys want me to review Death Magnetic, it will get a little bit better. But let me tell you, after a piece of shit like that, a turd coming out of a monkey's anus that's being littered onto a cat would look better than that. Anything would look better than that. I could simply shove the camera down my pants. You could admire my dick as it's frosting. It doesn't even really matter. This music that's on this record should be contained. It should be bottled up into a treatment plant. It should be fried in acid and destroyed. This album is an asshole sundae with a vomited, pukey, doo-doo aftertaste. It's like a garbage disposal threw up directly into my eardrums, pierced my brain, and destroyed my vision until the only thing that I could see was Metallica in the studio thinking, how exactly are we going to fuck the universe this time? I got a great idea. Let's release an album entitled Saint Anger and do absolutely nothing that's creative or new or innovative. How about we have Lars go into a kitchen, pound on a bunch of pots and pans, I'm James. I'm going to go get clean. We're going to get a guy that looks like a monkey to play bass, but not really because Bob Rock is infinitely better. And Kirk Hammett, you're going to be useless. You're not going to have a single solo on the entire record. Just sit over there in the corner and do nothing but jack off. And I really don't like this album. Plain and simple. You might. I don't. Metallica? No. Never again.